You ever smell a memory, friend? Close your eyes. Let me take you back to a place where the air was thick with brute cologne, cigarette smoke curling toward water-stained ceiling tiles, and the distant hum of 1,000 slot machines singing their siren songs. Las Vegas, August 1970. The desert night was anything but cool. 104 degrees when the sun went down, and somehow the neon made it hotter. The International Hotel, that great white monument to American excess, stood like a glittering cathedral on Paradise Road, and inside its showroom, 2,000 souls waited for their king. But backstage was a different world entirely. The dressing room. Picture, if you will, a room no bigger than a modest bedroom. Gold-framed mirrors lined with naked light bulbs, a leather couch that has seen better days, a table cluttered with the debris of ritual, a half-drunk glass of Perrier, a comb, a jar of Brill cream, and those heavy gold rings he'd slip on one by one, like a knight donning armor. And there, in the center of it all, stood Elvis Aaron Presley, 35 years old, already a legend, already in many ways a prisoner of that legend. He stared at himself in that mirror, really stared. The kind of look a man gives his reflection when he's asking questions he doesn't want answered. Who are you, son? What have you become? And how many more nights like this do you have left? He was wearing the white jumpsuit, you know the one. High collar, gold studs catching every flicker of light like captured stars. It was new then, part of Bill Ballew's revolutionary designs that would come to define this era of his career. He tugged at the collar, loosened it just a fraction. His hands were trembling. Now, I need you to understand something, friend. Elvis Presley was not a man easily shaken. This was a boy who had stared down segregated auditoriums in the Deep South, who had returned from 2 years in the army to reclaim a throne everyone said was already taken, who silenced every doubter with that 1968 comeback special, dressed in black leather like some rock and roll preacher returning from the wilderness. But tonight was different. Tonight, there was a folder sitting on that cluttered table, a manila folder with the weight of death inside it. The warning. The FBI had come calling 3 days earlier. Now, documented threats against Elvis existed throughout his career, and he was known to carry firearms regularly. Specific details of FBI involvement during this period come from various biographical accounts and should be understood as part of Elvis lore. 2 men in gray suits, the kind of men who looked like they were born in those suits, had sat in the living room of his home Behill's home and delivered news that would have sent most men running. There was a plot, credible, specific. Someone wanted Elvis Presley dead, or worse, taken, held for ransom, used as a bargaining chip in some twisted game that had nothing to do with music and everything to do with the desperate madness that celebrity attracts. They recommended he cancel the engagement, postpone, let them investigate, let the shadows do their work before he stepped into any spotlight. Elvis had listened, he had nodded, he had thanked them for their service. And then he had said no. I won't be held prisoner in my own room. Those words, simple words, but they carried the weight of everything he believed about duty, about performance, about the sacred contract between an entertainer and the souls who paid their hard-earned money to see him. The preparation. Red West was there that night. So was Sonny, the Memphis Mafia, those loyal soldiers who had followed him from Tupelo poverty to unimaginable fame, stood guard like centurions around their emperor. You don't have to do this, E, Red had said. Elvis had smiled, that crooked, boyish smile that could charm the anger out of anyone. Yeah, Red, I do. Now, what happened next has become the stuff of legend. Elvis Presley, the man who had changed American culture with nothing but a voice and a swiveling hip, prepared for war. He was a known firearms enthusiast. This is well documented. His collection was extensive, his knowledge deep, and that night, according to accounts from those close to him, Elvis did not walk onto that stage defenseless. There are stories of a small pistol tucked into his right boot, another at his waist, hidden beneath the drape of that magnificent jumpsuit. Whether every detail is precise, we may never know, but the spirit of the thing, that defiance, that refusal to bow to fear, that is unquestionable. He looked at himself one final time in that mirror. "Let's give him a show," he said. The walk. The corridor between the dressing room and the stage at the International Hotel was perhaps 60 feet long. On any other night, it was a triumphant march, a victory lap before the battle even began. Tonight, it felt endless. Elvis walked slowly. His boots, those custom-made beauties with the heavy soles, clicked against the linoleum floor. The sound echoed off the walls like a heartbeat. He could hear the crowd already, that electric hum, that anticipation that borders on hysteria. 2,000 people, waitresses carrying drinks watered down, high rollers in silk shirts, housewives from Ohio who had saved for 3 years to be here, teenagers who had grown up on his music and now sat beside parents who had fallen in love to it. Each one of them was a reason. Each one of them was why he could not, would not run. He reached the edge of the stage. The band was in position. James Burton on guitar, Ronnie Tutt on drums, the Sweet Inspirations ready to lift their voices to heaven. Joe Esposito leaned in close. "You okay, boss?" Elvis turned to him, and in that moment, Joe would later recall, there was something ancient in those blue eyes, something that transcended fear. "I was born for this, Joe. Whatever happens next, I was born for this." The orchestra. The orchestra launched into Also sprach Zarathustra, that thunderous fanfare that would become synonymous with his name. Thus spoke Zarathustra, thus spoke the king. The spotlight hit the curtain. The crowd rose as one, screaming, crying, reaching to the stage like pilgrims toward a shrine. And then he appeared. White jumpsuit blazing, cape flowing, arms spread wide in that iconic pose, half crucifixion, half benediction. The sound that erupted was not human. It was a force of nature, a thunderclap, a wave breaking against an ancient shore. Elvis Presley closed his eyes for just a moment, let it wash over him, let it fill every corner of his soul, and then he grabbed that microphone. The performance. What happened over the next 90 minutes was, by all accounts, transcendent. He didn't just sing that night, he channeled. He poured every ounce of fear, every drop of defiance, every fragment of gratitude into those songs. When he dropped to his knee on Suspicious Minds, women wept. When he closed his eyes and let How Great Thou Art build to its impossible crescendo, hardened Vegas gamblers felt something stir in their chest they hadn't felt since childhood. And when the band kicked into In the Ghetto, there were no dry eyes in that room. But here's what nobody knew. Throughout that entire show, Elvis Presley scanned the crowd with the eyes of a soldier. Every camera flash made his heart skip. Every sudden movement in the darkness beyond the stage lights triggered an ancient instinct. He was simultaneously delivering the performance of his life and preparing it for it to be his last. And yet, he never stopped, never faltered, never let them see the fear. Because that was who he was. That was the bargain he had made with the universe the moment he first stepped on a stage in Tupelo, Mississippi, as a shy boy with a borrowed guitar. You give them everything, every single night, no matter what. The aftermath. The show ended the way all Elvis shows ended in those days, with Can't Help Falling in Love. He drew out that final note, let it hang in the air like a prayer, and then he was gone. Swept backstage by his entourage, into a waiting car, through service corridors and freight elevators, away from the crowds, away from the cameras, away from whatever shadows might still be lurking. He made it. Later that night, sitting in his suite on the 30th floor of Las Vegas, he would remove those hidden weapons and set them on the nightstand. He would stare out at the Las Vegas Strip, all that neon and noise, and he would be silent for a very long time. Red West would later say that Elvis didn't sleep that night, not a minute. He just sat by the window, watching the sun come up over the desert. A man who had stared death in the face and kept singing. The legacy. Friend, I tell you this story not because it's dramatic, though Lord knows it is. I tell you because it reveals something essential about the man behind the myth. Elvis Presley was not perfect. His life was complicated, his choices sometimes questionable, his endings tragic. But in that moment, in August 1970, in a dressing room filled with mirrors and fear, he made a choice that defined the very best of who he was. He chose his fans over his safety. He chose his duty over his fear. He chose to be the king, even when the crown came with a target. And every time we hear that voice, that singular, God-given voice, echoing through the decades, we are hearing a man who sang like every note might be his last, because sometimes it might have been. He sang like a man who knew his time was short, but his legend was eternal. And somewhere in the universe, on a stage made of stars, the king is still performing, still defying the darkness, still giving them a show. The music begins to swell.
Mm-hmm.